Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blue Prism World, virtual world, in fact, the first ever this year. I'm joined by Jonathan Kidd from Bank of Ireland. Hello, Jonathan. Thank you for joining. Stefan Graf from Commerzbank, welcome. And last but not least, Julian Gray from HSBC. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment, but first, I wanted to think about the topic we're going to go through today. And primarily that's about all three panelists and their intelligent automation journey, what it's meant for them, the learnings and the lessons that they've had to endure and what they can share with our guests today at Blue Prism World. Also, I want to think about enabling technologies and how they've utilized those. And furthermore, I think it would be good for us to spend a little time talking about what COVID has meant to their customers, their environment and their banking operations. So Jonathan, can I ask you first of all, please, to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Adrian. My name is Jonathan Kidd. I am the head of digital operations and robotics at Bank of Ireland. And I've been involved with robotics for about 5 years now.
Great. Stefan, please.
Yes, I'm Stefan Graf, a Managing Director, Processes and Technology in Commerzbank's Delivery Center organization, and the head of our Center of Excellence Smart Automation, which is the RPA provider for the Commerzbank Group.
Lovely. Julian, please.
Hi, Julian Gray from HSBC. I've been part of the story in HSBC for some 5 years. We first brought in Blue Prism in the autumn 2015. But we've been in automation since forever in HSBC, just that's when we started involved down that line. And my involvement is, first of all, it was as a governance manager, and my duty was to make sure we didn't break the bank. Now I'm head of the automation service delivery, and my primary role is pretty much the same.
Okay, thank you very much to you all for those introductions. I'm going to start with a question to Jonathan, really for him to think about what the journey for intelligent automation has been for Bank of Ireland, where he's been on that journey. So Jonathan, could you give us just an idea of where it started and how you've been involved, please?
Sure. So similar to Julian, we started in 2015. That was our first experience with Blue Prism. There's obviously various types of automation before that, but robotics process automation, 2015. Started up as a small proof of concept with 4 or 5 people involved. Really agile cross-functional team, combining business SMEs with a couple of external Blue Prism experts and then some of our own internal people. Built the first process, took quite a while. Had to get all the technology up to speed. We got a lot of autonomy to do things on our own, and I think that was really beneficial to get us up and running. We weren't hampered by a lot of we were allowed to innovate, I suppose, and be entrepreneurial. Took us about 6 months probably to get the first process up and running. And after that since then it's been we've probably gone on a number of different stages in the journey. The first stage being that embryonic, get one process up and running. The next one being then slightly bigger, repeat that, but still very much in an entrepreneurial garage environment. And then the next one then was to start to stabilize that. We then became a bit more, we were important to pockets of pieces of the business. So we had to do things in a more structured way. The team got a little bit bigger, but still in a let's call it a small company mentality.
Whereabouts, Jonathan, if I may, sorry to interrupt you, whereabouts did you start on that journey with your team? Is there a specific area that you chose that you felt?
Sure. Well, there was as often with these things, there was a burning platform. So we had we released a new deposit product. It was a digital product, but it had a manual back end. And therefore, when customers wanted to, when they'd open those accounts and they wanted to take money out of those accounts, they sent in requests through a digital channel, but they were fulfilled manually in the back end. And as that product became more successful, there was a need to do that at scale. And we didn't want to it didn't make sense to have a lot of people doing the same thing over and over again every day. So there was a real opportunity there to use a robot to do relatively simple activity, but at a high volume.
Great. And Julian, same for you in operations. Did HSBC start in a particular area?
The HSBC story started with a perception that we could reduce the headcount in our service centres. And so they started focusing on the business areas that where there seemed to be, perhaps, should we call it, large number of heads. I wouldn't use the word excessive. But that story changed over time, because it wasn't that long before we realized that the metric of headcount wasn't an appropriate one for validating automation. It was more a question of efficiency.
Right.
So the business area that they were looking at was an area where there was a very complex process. It's all in the banking area, and it was a very complex process that involved accessing a lot of different back-end systems. I think that was the key, because users were sitting there, often waiting quite a long time as well. And this particular process was quite interesting, because end to end, it genuinely took sometimes an hour and a quarter from a cycle, simply because it was actually going to a lot of different systems, generating output, formal auditors' letters, and it was quite a complex exercise for customers who had cross system.
Yeah, I think that's a key one when you've got complex processes, and some of them not quite ready or tuned for automation. So there sometimes has to be some work done on those as well. Stefan, have you come across a similar situation in Commerzbank?
Yes, maybe let me spend some words on my company, on Commerzbank, as it may not be very known in the UK. Commerzbank is a leading international commercial bank based in Germany, and the second largest private bank in Germany, with 1,000 branches and more than 40,000 employees. And Commerzbank's delivery center organization that I'm working for consists of 7 subsidiaries in Germany and in Poland. And these are shared services center with 3,000 employees, providing business and banking processes for the Commerzbank group. And there, in the shared service center organization, we started in 2016 with a proof of concept for RPA, assuming that the processes that could be sourced could also be subject to automation. And after our first successful implementations within the shared services center area, our board asked us to build up a center of excellence for RPA to scale this capability, which we have developed in the shared services center, and make it available for the Commerzbank group. And thus we built our center of excellence, smart automation, with a centralized approach. And today we have a headcount of 100 people working for our center of excellence in different roles: business analysts, developers, process controller, maintenance, and an IT support team. But we still belong to the business side, as I said, to the back office shared service center division, but we are serving the whole Commerzbank group. And in terms of what do we have accomplished so far, we are currently running 85 processes in production, and they are using 125 digital workers and generating an efficiency effect of almost 300 FTE. And as we look on these figures, you may recognize that the number of our processes in production is rather low, but the efficiency effect is quite high. And the reason for that is that we try to find the big use cases, and we are looking for real process automation instead of task automation. And I think that's the same what Julian said. The real efficiency effect comes from the big, large use cases where many systems are involved, complex processes, where you have to do a lot of manual work.
And I guess, how important has it been for you to be on the business side? I hear this a lot from lots of clients. You know, how important has it been to Commerzbank for you and your Center of Excellence to be, you know, looking at the business, working with the business?
Yeah, very important from my perspective. The first reason is as we started in our shared service center organization, we were very close to our business processes. So we understood our business processes, and we were able to generate ideas. We were able to analyze those processes. We were able to restructure the processes in order to make them ready for automation. And we could work close together with our colleagues during the implementation phase. But that's only one reason. The second reason is, if you go to, let's say, old-fashioned IT, they will always tell you that robotic process automation is nothing we should go for. It's only a bridge technology. We are avoiding real efficiencies, real upgrade of systems, and so on. And so the IT is often more a doubter for RPA than a supporter.
That's interesting. And I think, Jonathan, just moving to you for a moment, and I'll come on to Julian. For a centre of excellence point of view, I mean, I think all three of you and your operations have strived to provide that centre of excellence and subject matter experts. Jonathan, how important has that centre of excellence been for your operation at Bank of Ireland?
Yeah, I think it's been essential. I'm not necessarily sure it's the end state model. We started off with an element of centre of COE, but we were allowing pockets to build up around the business, and that wasn't effective because we hadn't yet industrialized or standardized our process and methodology. So then we moved very much to a COE, and that was very successful. But actually, our numbers are very similar to Stefan's, and actually I'm starting to consider now the potential to have more of a federated model. So now that we have standards, can we train people to be to operate at the quality of our COE, but to be embedded in the businesses around the group? But critically to us, as Stefan said, I think the agility you get from being embedded in the business, and I think if you look at what agile means, what Stefan described is exactly our experience, and I think it is that co-location, that shared understanding, that ability to maximize the return on investment that you get from being localized with the business owners.
And I know that HSBC have taken the same view in terms of a federated model because of the amount of locations they have and separate countries. But just for our audience, what do you mean by a federated model? You have a centre of excellence that's centralised. What do you mean? What does it mean to Bank of Ireland?
So what that means is that again, as Stefan described, so our role centrally would be architecture, analysis, development, control room operation, and then we're supported by infrastructure. All of that is held centrally. Those people are trained centrally. They operate according to standard methodology. They go through a standard training plan. They have mentorship and coaching. A federated model means that training centrally, but then effectively putting those developers and analysts back into individual units outside the COE, but with some kind of a dotted line or a chapter kind of structure across the group where those people can come together, and effectively it's like a matrix structure. They're embedded in a business, but they feel connected to the COE even though they're not in it.
Got it. So horizontal across the verticals, number one, and also being able to lift and shift those teams of experts across the different parts of the business. Yeah,
I think the lifting and shifting probably, I would hope that in areas like back office operations or front office channels, and particularly direct channels, I would hope that there's enough scale there to justify those people staying in those federated, let's call them spokes on a hub, that they wouldn't, because there's real value in those people building up expertise in pockets of the business. If you move them around, you just don't get the same level of velocity that you get, and acceleration over time as people get familiar with the business areas.
Okay, so it's more about that training continuing through the teams and advisory to make sure that whilst you're federating, the staff are gaining their own skills, because otherwise you slow the adoption down of
yeah, you do.
Okay, thank you. And Julian, for you, I mean, I know that HSBC has worked hard across many different areas of the business and looking at their COE, how would you describe that in terms of HSBC? I mean, certainly operations I know well, but what about other areas of the bank?
So I'm fascinated by the term federation because I really struggle. If you remember, I came at this originally from a governance perspective. And with governance, what you're trying to do is you're trying to verify that there are rules in place, and then that you can ensure that people are adhering to them. And when the point about federation is that you devolve the responsibility. So you actually say to a department, okay, you carry that responsibility, you have to stick to the rules. So within the automation world, it's actually really difficult, because everybody is not going to think and understand and have the breadth of knowledge or the technical awareness that Julian Gray has. And Julian Gray is not going to have the same business area knowledge that the departments have.
For sure, I understand.
And there are so many parts of the business that I have very little understanding of, and I'm constantly getting caught out by that. So I think with federation, what I want to see happening actually probably isn't happening, because what I want to see is I want to see everybody singing off the same hymn sheet. But it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, partly because the different business areas each has such particular different requirements. Our customers are actually, with COVID, the rules have changed a little bit, but the customers in the retail world are different in their needs for the customers in the business world and in GBM. So I think therefore that federation actually has to have different perspectives of policing, of managing, of ensuring the adherence.
So what lessons, I think, back to Stefan for a moment, what lessons as we talk through the federation, which I think is becoming, key in some areas, and in others, I completely understand Julian's point of view of how difficult that can practically be to manage. Stefan, how have you managed that within Commerce Bank?
Yeah, well, as I said, we have a centralized approach. So all the roles are within our Center of Excellence Smart Automation, and we are working close together with the operation teams, with the process manager, with the system owner. But at the end, the business analysts, developers are all located in our Center of Excellence, because I think you need it, at least at our stage where we are, to make sure that you have a consistent development, that you follow the governance, that you follow the rules, our delivery methodology. And also there are a lot of marketing stories out in the world telling that every end user will be able to develop his own processes, but that's not our experience. In order to be a really good developer, which is complying to the development guidelines and is able to build robust processes, you need, let's say, 3 to 6 months at least, and you need to work full time in this area. And marketing stories are misleading. So if you want to go for a federated model, all those business lines who want to use RPA and want to set up her own business analysts and developer, they need to understand that they have a lot of training effort, that they need to comply to the rules, and that they need to have full-time people who are doing RPA work. And currently, at least our organization is ready for that. That's why we are still go for a centralized approach.
Absolutely, yeah, that framework. Go on, sorry, Julian, you were going to say.
It's okay. That's a very interesting aspect, because business areas come to us or come to me and they ask me, what does it cost? We want to do some automation, what does it cost? They don't like it when I tell them it costs 6 months. They want me to tell them it costs X $1,000. Because they can handle a budget line, but a timeline is a very different thing. And Stefan, you're absolutely right. It's at the 6 month end of the 3 to 6 months.
I think, Adrian, just a comment there. I think while we are primarily I would say 90% still COE. We have dipped our toe in the water with the federated model, and it is working. And something that has really made us rethink that, because if you'd spoken to me 6 months ago, I would have been less enthusiastic, has been COVID. So if I have a developer who's working from home and an analyst who's also working from home, and they're trained in our methodology and they've worked in the COE for 3 years, what's the difference between them working from home with a line to me versus a line to a business banking product manager? They're still analyzing in the same way, developing in the same way, testing in the same way, adhering to the same standards, overseen by the same architecture panel, overseen by the same robotics design panel. So and similarly with our offshore development teams, where we've had a challenge to integrate them in a consistent way. So COVID is challenging me to rethink our ability to manage a disparate team in a consistent fashion, and the traditional, yeah. So that's so I absolutely agree. We're still absolutely majority center of excellence, but I do believe that where we've dipped our toe in the water with federated aspects, and actually it has been through COVID, it has been successful.
Well, that's good, because I think, if you're able to do that, and you have, as Stefan quite rightly said, all the governance in place, what needs to happen, the strict rules are adhered to, federation will work, and we've seen that. And some of that, Julian, has been done successfully in HSBC, of course, as we know. But I think for me now, I would like to just move on to a couple of questions around synergies of enabling technologies, just as we go through this. Is there anything that you've seen, certainly with, automation in terms of blockchain or any other certainly solutions, AI analytics, that although AI stands for many things to lots of people, but are there any other type of solutions that you've seen or adhered to that form part of your governance strategy? Jonathan, can you start with that, please?
Sure. I thought a little bit about this. If I break the overlap into 3 areas, so this isn't exhaustive, but probably 3 headline areas. First one is around data in. So the quality of your automation, and the quality and the success of an individual automation is heavily reliant on the quality of your input data. And where your input data is clear and defined from the start, that's great. But where the first place where AI can potentially add value is in providing better quality input data by enriching that data through a variety of means. And by removing some of the ambiguity through decision-making that robotics and channels just don't do. The second is in terms of processing, and again, it's in that decision-making space where RPA doesn't make decisions. It doesn't learn from data and build up a pattern over time. It executes exactly what you tell it to do. So in some processes, everything is rules-based, and in some processes, everything is decision-based. But a lot of the more complex processes, particularly as you move up the value chain, as the complexity of customer base, is an overlap between the two. So that's the second area where the two can help. And then the third is probably in data aggregation, where we use robotics in big projects to prepare data, to pass it through an analytics data lake for it then to be used for decision-making purposes. So we've seen a lot of overlap between the two.
Thank you for that. And we're seeing a lot of machine learning tools now coming to do predictive and remember, and certainly the OCR type in certain languages. We're seeing a lot of that in the Middle East as well. So Julian, similar question to you. Synergies in tooling and AI for HSBC must be.
Okay, so I think the key, we're a bank. And tools like IoT just aren't on the radar certainly from my perspective. We do have AI, but it's in analytics. It's not in the automation area. And I really can't see it coming into the automation area anytime soon. But I think you talk about the synergies of other technologies. And I think one of the elephants in the room is cloud and cloud service, because the core key for a good automation service is going to be to provide a reliable service in the cloud, right? If that's optimized against the business needs, then that's going to work, and it's going to work across the business areas, and it'll work for both banking and for others. And I'm quite keen to explore the use of cloud-based partner services, but I have a strong suspicion that's going to be a really slow journey.
And why would you say that? This is a rhetorical question, obviously, but why would you say that for you and your operation, cloud is the elephant in the room still, even though the regulators have loosened their rules around this? Why is it still the elephant in the room?
For the same reason that the adoption of the digital workforce terminology and technology in business areas is slow and is patchy. It's because there is suspicion about security, and there is suspicion about the bandwidth implications, and because we have a lot of platforms on-prem. And cloud, having a service operating in the cloud, talking to on-prem services just isn't a reality. And think about what RPA specifically, when it comes to automation, what RPA is doing. It's a single integration of a lot of different back-end systems. And if those back-end systems are on-prem, then cloud probably isn't suitable. So I think that there is going to be a slow uptake for this, because the landscape will have to change for how that automation is happening. And with that's really interesting as to where COVID is having an impact on us. Suddenly, we've had to meet a whole new style of automation demand, where in the UK and in other countries around the globe, and UK is not unique in this, the government have suddenly said, right, here's some government-backed loans, please go and deliver it next Tuesday. We don't operate to that sort of cadence normally. Projects take longer than 3 days normally. And we've had to ramp up delivery of robots, of platforms, of code, and testing cycles to hyper speed Mach 10 just to get these through the door. And there's been a narrowing of focus. Those kind of things should work well on the cloud, because you've got scalability, because you've got single focus. And it's that single focus that means that we might actually be going down that route. However, I'm innately suspicious of decisions that are not rule-based. So I'm going to be very cautious about any integration with AI. But cloud, I think, probably there's going to be a gentle toe in the water over the coming year.
Thank you, Julian. Stefan, enabling technologies and cloud. I'd like to get your feelings on cloud for Commerce Bank. That would be interesting.
I think I've got the same view as Julian concerning cloud. Yes, everyone is speaking about cloud, and we have also a cloud-first strategy. However, most of the applications are still on-prem. But what my expectation toward cloud is helping scalability, helping improving the scalability, and not having all those VDIs on-prem, planning 3 months in advance how many VDIs I would need for my next processes. So my expectation on cloud is helping in scalability. Concerning other technologies, you mentioned blockchain. Commerzbank is heavily involved in blockchain use cases. However, we currently do not have any use case that links smart automation with a blockchain, and I currently also do not see any use case. But more interesting are, let's say, machine learning technologies. We are currently working on some use cases which combine chatbot, talkbot technologies, which has a machine learning component with smart automation. So we get the input for our processes through chatbots or talkbots, which are then structured through machine learning algorithms, and we could use them to feed our processes. And this is a promising area from my perspective.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. Jonathan, I've just got to ask you, for Bank of Ireland, I have to ask you on cloud, just so we get, three different views.
So I would break it into two halves. I think I would agree with everything people have said in relation to cloud adoption for on-prem existing bank applications. I think we're all in a similar space, and probably it's very reassuring when I speak to a group of banks and I find we're all struggling with the same challenge, right? Because then you feel sometimes like you're about 10 years behind. However, there's definitely opportunity for cloud to leverage call out, so third-party software as a service provision, and we do that quite a bit. So, for example, it's quite a simple one, but for customer communications, we leverage a SaaS provider for SMS and email communications, and then there's you can manage things like GDPR through data control, encryption, limit, retention, very short retention periods, not sending out customer sensitive data. So the opportunity to leverage cloud, Amazon microservices would be another example. So there's an opportunity to leverage cloud by calling out to third-party AI-based services without impacting the integrity of the security architecture of the core bank. Right. And that is an area where we're definitely seeing value.
And there's growth. There's growth in that area because you're not.
Sorry, there's frightening growth in that area. There's growth.
All right, so let's just move on. I think. Go on, Julian. Were you going to?
Sorry, Adrian. I just come back to on that. Jonathan's spot on. We are moving services. I wouldn't say we're moving services into the cloud. I would say we are adopting services in the cloud. So when we come to a new requirement, it will be cloud first, as Stefan says. I think the much more difficult thing is the way RPA and automation that is associated with RPA style digital workers it's very compute based. And it doesn't always make sense to move a compute engine out into the cloud.
Indeed. So I'm going to quickly, thank you for that, Julian. I'm going to quickly move around one area each. I know we've touched on COVID, but I'd just like to start with Stefan and just go around very quickly, and then we'll finish off with lessons learned, I think, as we get to our 45-minute time slot. Stefan, COVID-19 for Commerzbank.
Okay, COVID-19. Well, through COVID-19, the quantities in some processes have risen sharply, in particular like stock exchange trading or also the credit and loan sector. And there we support with automation and use the scalability of our digital workers in order to tackle those increased volumes and keeping the service level for our customers. So this is the main change through COVID, and it generates definitely an increased visibility within the organization, because these are now high visible processes, and I think this will increase the demand for RPA.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan?
Sure. I think in the short term, BAU, normal, particularly credit-based product volumes down, so robotic activity down there. However, payment break activity through the roof, and then a sharp requirement to develop processes more quickly than normal, and then us getting better at developing as a result of that, with an expectation that, please God, when things stabilize and start to return to an element of normality, a bounce back on economic activity with a resultant spike then in some of the automated processes that we've seen dips in before, particularly again in the lending space.
Yeah, very true. I mean, Blue Prism's been working hard, just before I bring Julian in, to build CBILS out and BDL loans and automate that, so that we start to look more at solutions that we can very quickly give to banks under these circumstances. And it's working well. Julian?
Yeah, we're much the same as everywhere else around the world. We've had new solutions to deliver government underwritten business loans, payment holiday processes. An interesting point here is the normal mantra is the design of the robot mimics what the human does. That's how we would normally have analyzed and delivered. For these new COVID-related processes, there is no existing process to track. There's no nice ready-made process flow documents written over centuries. So there's been a lot more design on the fly going on that we're used to, or indeed that I'm comfortable with. And we've delivered at a pace, a frightening pace. What really worries me is that come the end of the COVID cycle, the management are going to expect us to continue to deliver at that pace.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to go backwards. I can see that. So thank you, gentlemen. So last question, Jonathan, I'll start you off. Lessons learned, key guidance for people watching today on the panel.
I think we've all recognized the value in a center of excellence, establishing standards, focusing on a small number of the big use cases, as Stefan said. It's better to have 50 high value processes than 300 low value ones. Definitely in-house capability. RPA is a slowly build the efficiency technology. It's not something that you bring in a small crack team in for 6 months and you realize a silver bullet. It's a multi-year, slowly transform your organization. Maybe some of my guidelines.
Julian.
Yeah, so get the C-suite on board. That's fundamental. And get a good evangelist to manage the storyboard. Earlier, Stefan talked about the publicity stories. I think that needs managing by somebody who knows what's going on. I would say, look, I'm old school, okay? So I would say question everything. Old-fashioned rules of design do still apply in the brave new digital world, and you should still, don't cut corners there, which is very much what Jonathan is saying. And my bottom line is I will support anything that is simple and secure and sustainable.
Excellent. Thank you, Julian. Great. Stefan.
Yes, I do agree with all Jonathan and Julian said. Start small, prepare well, and then scale fast. Centralized approach. But some new aspect from my side is prepare a compelling marketing story, which is telling about helping your people to get rid of annoying tasks and non-value adding tasks instead of having the evil robot army which is coming to cut jobs. And you need to have a very good marketing story. And it's also helpful to create a brand. We created a brand for our digital workers. It's our Kobe, which is our little hardworking Commerzbank B, which is helping to reduce all those annoying tasks. And this was one of our main success factors from my perspective.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. So Jonathan Kidd, Bank of Ireland, Stefan Graf from Commerzbank, and Julian Gray, thank you so much from HSBC. Thank you so much for joining, and your input, I'm sure, will be excellent for everybody to hear and watch. Thanks for joining the banking panel.
Thank you.